Daniel chapter 1 Introduction. From captives to world-class leaders. Daniel chapter 1 is a portrait of resilience, identity, and excellence under pressure. It provides a blueprint for thriving in environments that want to change who you are. This is a story of the metamorphosis of four young men, exiled and rebranded, who rose to become the most influential advisors in the ancient superpower of Babylon. The sovereignty of God in the shadow of defeat. Verses 1 and 2. Verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. In 605 BC, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar, whose name means, "O Nabu my God, protect my boundary," besieged the fortified walls of Jerusalem. This siege was not a historical accident or a failure of God's power. Verse 2 reveals the truth. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand. The key truth lies in the Hebrew word Nathan, the Lord delivered, which means to hand over intentionally by divine authority. What appeared to be Jerusalem's defeat was in fact the fulfillment of the Lord's long-promised judgment upon Judah for persistent rebellion as foretold by the prophets. 2 Kings 24, 1-2 and Jeremiah 25 verses 1 and 9. Some articles from the temple of God were carried off to the temple of his God in Babylonia and put in the treasure house of his God. In the ancient Near East, the removal and placement of a conquered nation's sacred articles symbolized one deity's victory over another, and Nebuchadnezzar intended this act to celebrate the triumph of Babylonian god Marduk. Yet, even in the transfer of these temple articles to the land of Shinar, the site of the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11, was a strategic placement by God. He was setting the stage for Daniel chapter 5, where the misuse of these vessels would expose Babylon's gods, Baal, Marduk, and Nebo, as utterly powerless before the Most High. Babylon's strategic selection of future leaders. Verses 3 and 4. Verse 3. Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring in some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility. By selecting youths from noble families, the king aimed to harness their natural leadership and potential and train them to serve Babylon's glory. Verse 4. Young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar's strategy was to cut off Judah's elite youth from their past and implant a new Babylonian identity. He looked for 1. Physical perfection. It projected the king's strength and divine favor. 2. Aptitude for learning. Minds malleable enough to master the difficult Chaldean curriculum of Akkadian and Aramic language and Babylonian literature and mythology. While Nebuchadnezzar chose these criteria for political reasons, he inadvertently selected the very kind of men God had designated for spiritual leadership, that is, priests and kings. In Israel, a priest had to be without a physical defect, a symbol of consecrated purity. Leviticus 21 verses 17 to 21. And a king was commanded to be wise, discerning, and governed by God's law. Deuteronomy 17 verses 18 to 20. God used the king's selfish desire for excellence to position men who were faithful to him right in the center of Babylon. The assignment of new identity. Verses 5 to 7. The king used two primary tools to override their destiny. 1. The king's table. Verse 5. The king assigned them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that they were to enter the king's service. The king's offer of royal food and wine was a calculated strategy to instill dependency and obligation, not an act of hospitality. To eat from his table was to slowly internalize his values, acknowledge him as provider and protector, and forget their covenant identity. Moreover, this food was spiritually defiled, having first been offered to idols. Leviticus 11 and Exodus chapter 34:15. The accompanying 3-year training program was precisely calibrated so that they have time enough to master the empire's complex knowledge, learn their cuneiform script, lose their connection to their homeland, and fully adopt to the etiquette of the royal court. The ultimate goal was to redirect their God-given gifts towards the glory of Babylon, reshaping their very identity to serve the Babylonian Empire. 2. Rebranding with new identity. Verses 6 and 7. Among them were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar; to Hananiah, Shadrach; to Mishael, Meshach; and to Azariah, Abednego. This renaming was a deliberate attempt to overwrite their identity. Their Hebrew names were theological declarations containing the name of God: El in Daniel and Mishael, and Yah in Hananiah and Azariah. Daniel, God is my judge, was named Belteshazzar. Baal, a Babylonian god, protect his life. Hananiah, the Lord is gracious, was renamed Shadrach, command of Aku, a moon god. Mishael, who is like God, was renamed Meshach, who is like Aku. Azariah, the Lord is my helper, was renamed Abednego, servant of Nebo, a Babylonian god of wisdom and destiny. By replacing these names with ones that honored pagan deities, Babylon sought to erase their covenant identity, sever their connection with God's law, and rewrite their history of redemption. This symbolic act aimed to transfer their allegiance from the God of Israel to the gods of Babylon. The audacity of integrity, the power of no. Verse 8. But Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way. Their no to the king's table became the foundational yes to their divine destiny. While Babylon changed Daniel's location, verse 1 and 2, his education, verse 4, and even his name, verse 7, verse 8 reveals the one thing Babylon could not change: his conscience. Though Daniel was strategically placed in Babylon, yet he refused to be spiritually absorbed by it. Daniel drew a clear inner boundary, affirming that his true identity and source of life came from the Lord and not the Babylonian Empire. The mechanics of divine favor. Verse 9. Now God had caused the official to show favor and sympathy to Daniel. While Daniel was performing a significant personal risk by refusing the king's food, God was already working on the other side of the equation, the heart of the official. This divine synergy shows that when you honor your internal boundaries and remain true to your convictions, you do not need to manipulate people or circumstances. Instead, unwavering faith allows God to transform your greatest obstacles into your most significant opportunities. Caught between conviction and command. Verse 10. But the official told Daniel, I am afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. In this verse, the chief official expresses his hesitation out of a legitimate fear for his own life. Within the high-stakes environment of the Babylonian court, any failure to produce healthy, vibrant subjects would be viewed as a personal failure to the king, punishable by execution. His response shows that Daniel's faith-based request carried real consequences for others under royalty as well. Now Daniel had to find a way to honor God without causing the downfall of the very man who had shown him favor. The proposal of a test. Verses 11 to 13. Daniel then said to the guard whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servant for 10 days. Give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance with that of the young men who eat the royal food and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. Daniel responded to pressure with wisdom and faith, proposing a respectful 10-day test rather than rebelling. This trial, often noted as one of the earliest clinical style tests, avoided alarm in the Babylonian court and created space for God to act. Daniel did not treat faith as a formula. If I do X, God must do Y. But as a relationship, I will do X because I trust God regardless of the outcome. By combining both integrity with respectful diplomacy, Daniel demonstrated that even small and wise acts of obedience can make a meaningful difference and honor God. The 10-day transformation, verse 15. At the end of 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. This was a divine reversal of all natural expectations. What began as a simple God-honoring commitment became the platform for miraculous provision. God honored their faithfulness with undeniable results, granting a transformative strength, a distinctive glow, and a vitality that outshone all others. This was more than superior health. It was a visible signature of divine favor. From conviction to policy, verse 16. So the guard took away their choice food and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. Compelled by the undeniable results of the 10-day test, the guard makes the dietary change permanent. This is far more than a simple menu adjustment. It's the official, systematic acceptance of their faithful stand. Daniel transformed a personal conviction into a lasting new policy. The reward of integrity, wisdom beyond training. Verse 17. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning, and Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. Notice the emphasis. God gave. He rewarded the faithfulness of these young men by granting them exceptional knowledge and understanding that far surpassed Babylonian standard curriculum. This distinction proves that while the world can provide training, true wisdom comes from God alone. Beyond academic mastery, Daniel received the additional distinct gift of interpreting visions and dreams and decode spiritual mysteries, a supernatural ability that uniquely positioned him for his future prophetic role. This demonstrates that when your character is guarded, God Himself enlarges your capacity. The tenfold distinction from examination to exaltation, verses 18 to 20. At the end of the time set by the king to bring them in, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. The king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Wow! The 10 times better distinction is an exponential blessing, an expression of complete excellence. It proves a universal truth. Faithfulness to your core values directly enhances your professional competence. When you operate from a place of integrity and divine purpose, you don't just compete, you dominate the field. Their entry into the king's service wasn't a stroke of luck or political networking. It was the inevitable outcome of a life where character-driven excellence meets God-given capacity. The power of longevity, a legacy that outlasts empires. Verse 21. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. This single verse spans the entire Babylonian exile and into the Medo-Persian period. Daniel witnessed a major turning point in history, from the beginning of the exile in 605 BC to the rise of Cyrus the Persian in 539 BC. Serving with excellence well into his later years, Daniel lived to see the decree that allowed his people to return home, marking the fulfillment of Jeremiah's prophecy of restoration. Jeremiah 29 verse 10. Conclusion. The Daniel legacy. Daniel's journey from a captive in a foreign land to the most influential advisor in the world's greatest empire proves that your environment doesn't have to dictate your outcome. As you move forward, remember the lesson of the pulse and the palace. You do not have to lose yourself to succeed. You do not have to eat the king's food to earn the king's favor. You will be 10 times wiser by being 100% faithful. Build your life not on the delicacies of the fading empire, but on the disciplines of an eternal kingdom. The person of integrity doesn't just survive the age, they define it.